Good morning and welcome to the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:37 a.m. We're going to have David Benton, our Chief Assistant Attorney, do the call to public guidelines.
Good morning. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Members of the public may speak up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We believe we have one speaker this morning for Call the Public.
Yes, Chairwoman. Deborah Dijak, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. This is Deborah Dijak.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
I just wanted to do this in response to the rally and press conference that was held yesterday about the City of Phoenix employees being asked to get a mandatory, COVID shot. And I've been a registered nurse here in Arizona for 40 years, and I really don't think this is the right way to go. I was with the group that walked down to the City of Phoenix chambers yesterday, and I don't believe these people are bluffing. These are very serious professionals who I believe would leave their jobs and put the City of Phoenix and potentially other parts of Arizona in a not a good situation in terms of safety. And so I just want you to really think about that. I worked as a public health nurse for many years in Pima County. And, when you're working with people, you always want to respect who they are, where they came from, and the rights that they have. And so I would hate to see that not happen. I know we celebrated Pearl Harbor's anniversary yesterday, and I think that's just a good thing to remember about, the importance of really why did we fight these wars, if we're going to go back to living in a time of abuses. I don't think we want that to happen. So please respect these people. I'm very thankful for you. I'm very thankful for the people who serve. I've served myself in different capacities over the years, and I know we can make this community stronger, but I don't think that mandating experimental shots is the right way to go about that. So thank you very much for listening. Have a good meeting.
Thank you for your comments, Deborah. We will move to the minutes of the meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Chairwoman, we do have a request to speak during the minutes as well.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you for that reminder. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Thank you for the second, and then we will go to the public comments during this item.
Mr. Mark Rodriguez, are you on the line? He is not on the line. Mr. Steve Berline, are you on the line? He is not on the line. Keith Fry, are you on the line? He is not on the line either, Chairwoman.
Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the November 10th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We have 2 items on consent. Do I have a motion to approve our consent items 2 and 3?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion to and a second to approve consent action items 2 and 3. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Items 4 and 5 are for information only, so we will move to item 6, which is the 2022 state and federal legislative agenda. And for that item, do we have Frank with us this morning?
Morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. Thank you for allowing our Office of Government Relations the opportunity to share with the subcommittee the items from the draft legislative agenda for review and approval. I'm Frank McCune, Director of Government Relations, and today with me is Lauren Armour, Manager of State Relations, and Eric Gudino, Manager of Federal Relations. As a reminder, each year in September, Government Relations reaches out to all city departments to build the legislative agenda, which is based upon issues that may be discussed during the legislative process or even to gather potential legislative ideas. We combine that information and then brief each council member and the mayor for their perspectives on those items, as well as learn about other items they may have interest. From there, we compile this draft legislative agenda, and today we present the items that are relevant to this subcommittee for your review and approval. With that, we will begin with Lauren to present the state legislative agenda today. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. My name is Lauren Armour, as Frank introduced, and I'll be presenting the state legislative agenda for the coming year. Each year, our state legislative agenda begins with 4 guiding principles that encompass our broadest mandate for advocacy on behalf of the city, as well as our highest priorities. Those are to preserve state shared revenues, oppose unfunded mandates, protect local authority, and preserve water resources. The remaining items in this presentation are specific to the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. The first item is police and the mental health system. To reduce recidivism and ensure patients and the community are considered, it is essential that additional resources be allocated to the mental health system. Furthermore, police are currently the first responders in many cases involving an individual in need of mental health treatment. And so, staff recommends supporting efforts to allocate additional resources to the state's mental health system and to work on potential legislation to reduce the involvement of police in matters of care for mental health patients. Our police have requested continued public safety funding. While the protection of state shared revenue remains a top priority, other public safety related funds are also important to the city. The following 2 items are of particular interest for police funding: continued funds for the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, or ACTIC, and the authorization of monies for Internet Crimes Against Children, or ICAC, investigations. Staff requests the authority to pursue these public safety-related funds. The issue of authorized transporters. Current law requires the use of peace officers for the transport of patients to evaluation agency. This is the case even if the transport is from a healthcare facility, and a different type of transport may be in the best interest of the patient and could result in more efficient use of law enforcement resources. So staff recommends amending the Arizona Revised Statutes to permit an authorized transporter other than a peace officer to complete transportation of patients in need of evaluation for hospitalization. Addressing homelessness. Across the country and in the city of Phoenix, the number of unsheltered individuals and families experiencing homelessness has increased significantly, with the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbating the plight of those experiencing homelessness. The Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, allocated through a formula by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, is one of the city's primary resources for funding dedicated to individuals and families experiencing homelessness. ESG funds support the following types of services: street outreach, diversion and prevention, emergency shelter, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing. Staff recommends supporting continued and increased funding for ESG. A reduction in ESG would result in a decrease of homeless services at a time when need is increasing. Street feeding. Street feeding, while often well-intentioned, can result in negative impacts for people experiencing homelessness and the surrounding community, especially if the food is not prepared within the standards outlined by the state in order to ensure health and sanitation. By allowing this loophole, the loophole called the potluck loophole, our most vulnerable residents are put at more risk by those who may or may not be well-intentioned, especially during the health crisis resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Staff recommends supporting efforts to revise the Arizona Revised Statutes and the Arizona Administrative Code to add language to differentiate between food served at a non-commercial social event, such as a potluck, from food served to the general public or targeted non-associated populations, such as those experiencing homelessness. That concludes the presentation of state priorities relevant to this committee. I'll pass the presentation now to my colleague, Eric Gudino.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'd like to present our federal priorities specific to the subcommittee, but before I do, I'd like to highlight our guiding principles, which are promotion of fiscal sustainability and the protection of local authority. Federal priorities for our police department include advocating for public safety grants and programs through the Office of Justice Programs. This funding has provided support and resources that contribute to crime prevention and suppression efforts, technology enhancements, and public safety improvements. We will also advocate to ensure that the Urban Area Security Initiative, or UASI, funding remains intact and seek funding opportunities through this program. These grants are used to fund homeland security programs and projects within the police and fire departments for terrorism prevention, natural disaster, and emergency response. And we will closely monitor any legislation and initiatives related to police reform and encourage our congressional delegation to continue discussions on this issue. Federal priorities for our fire department include advocating for Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, grant programs to be fully funded and expanded, and seek funding opportunities through these programs to help support emergency services. This funding helps support the city's ability to deliver emergency services and has gone towards hiring new firefighters, purchasing equipment, and training programs. Federal priorities for our prosecutor's office include pursuing grants and assistance to further develop and expand our specialty courts. Our Veterans Court and Behavioral Health Court focus on serving special populations of justice-involved individuals in our communities. Services provided go towards addressing the needs of victims, offenders, veterans, and their families, and those affected by behavioral health issues. Federal priorities for our city manager's office include opposing any efforts to repeal or reprogram COVID-19 response and recovery aid to local governments through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and support ongoing flexibility in use. Earlier this year, there were efforts to sweep the second tranche of local funding through efforts of the National League of Cities and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. These attempts were halted. We will work closely with our congressional delegation and national organizations to monitor and oppose these efforts should they occur again.
Madam Chair and committee members, that concludes our presentation of the items related to this subcommittee, and we would recommend approval of both the state and federal 2022 agenda items.
Thank you so much for the recommendation and the presentation. Do I have a motion to approve the state and federal agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or questions for staff? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We will go to item 7, which is for information discussion, police department staffing discussion, and I believe we have Chief Williams with us today.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. This morning we would like to update you on our staffing discussion, as well as talk about a number of different efforts that we are looking at in order to mitigate our operational needs while still providing service to the community. As you see in this slide, we routinely start off and let you know what our staffing levels are on the department. If you look from left to right, you'll see that we have 2,755 sworn positions filled. If you look up the chart, there are 370 vacancies. You have 179 civilian vacancies, 37 recruits in the academy, and 31 officers in training in various precincts. So as previously mentioned at the table a couple of meetings ago, there are 6 different efforts that we're looking at in order to maintain baseline service delivery. It includes call type reduction, deferred patrol response, dispatch protocol changes, civilianization, the accessibility of body-worn cameras for all officers, and the continuation of the Specialty Back to Patrol program. Let's first look at call type reduction. You all previously approved Arizona State University's study of a number of different call types that we could look at that over the course of academia or over the course of other public safety efforts, many agencies are looking at reducing the calls to the call center, first of all, and secondly, the response to patrol. So let's look at what those call types are. Arizona State University provided 11 different call types that were identified. We think of those 11, there are 6 that warrant further review in order to, again, mitigate the number of calls coming into our call center, as well as assigning people in patrol to respond to those calls. If you look at the call types, the first one is an intrusion alarm or false alarm. We don't think that that's a viable option for us at this moment, although Arizona State University is going to continue to do that study. The second one is assisting fire with an unruly patient and or a check welfare call. We receive about 60,000 calls for service of those every year, and we also don't want to put our fire department into harm's way also. We looked at drug overdoses, but truth be told, I mean, we're there to help and assist and save people, and I think you all are aware that we've issued naloxone to our patrol officers, and to date they've saved 81 lives, so that would be 81 people who would be in harm's way, so that doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. If you look at call types 4 through 9, I'll go into those in more detail. The first one is a civil matter standby. What those are exchanges of children, relationships between roommates, a merchant, or a customer. We get roughly 14,000 of those calls per year, and we believe by mitigating that or offboarding that, we could save some time and effort into the call center, as well as fewer dispatch to police. The fifth effort would be the abandoned vehicles. We get about 10,000 of those per year. Now, this is a requirement for PD to handle, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this blue suit to handle it. It could be a police assistant or another entity. Next, we have found property. We get about 3,200 calls per year on found property. Some of that could be us educating the community on where to drop off items if they're found, as opposed to calling into the call center and or assigning a police officer to retrieve that. So we could educate the public on dropping off what they found to the nearest substation and or taking it to Property Management Bureau. But again, this could be mitigated by a civilian staff member as well. Minor vehicle accidents and or non-injury crashes and or hit and runs. The minor vehicle accident with no injury, we get about 26,000 of those per year. The minor vehicle hit and run, we get about 10,000 of those per year. Again, it's a requirement for the police department to handle those types of calls, but we believe it would be better filled with a civilian member or a police assistant to handle the exchange of information. Have illegal parking calls, we get about 6,200 of those per year. As opposed to having an officer dispatched at that time, we could have a community action officer follow up on that during their work hours or assign those to a police assistant. And lastly, our noise complaints, and this one can be a little bit tricky. I know most of you have constituents who call into you on noise complaints. I know I routinely get messages from members of the public about the noise complaints. but we get about 14,000 of those per year. There are some cities that have assigned a noise abatement department to manage those during business hours. We could have a community action officer follow up on those during business hours, but that's something that we could look at. In total, in Jerry's math, which is kind of rough math, we're looking at about 80 to 90,000 calls for service that we could offboard from patrol, thereby having them focus their efforts on other things. The two call types I didn't discuss or talk about are the loose animal calls and the smoking marijuana in public. We could offboard those calls as well, but the loose animal could be a safety issue, and the smoking marijuana in public, we've moved forward and past that due to the legalization of marijuana. Just for your notification, our total calls for service that we get into the call center in 2020 were about 2 million calls, where 660 of those were dispatched, meaning patrol was dispatched to those. In 2021 through November, we've had 1.8 million calls into the call center, with roughly 614,000 of those being dispatched. The second six
Madam Chair, can I go back to this list for a second?
Yes, please.
Just make a couple points. So first, on number 2, the way I heard it, you said 60,000, but there's no way I heard that correctly. So given the numbers you just had, assisting fire with unruly patients.
So
it kind of cut out a little bit, at least on my feed, and so.
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Councilmember Waring, we assigned number 2 really as a check welfare, and our check welfare responses are about 60,000 a year. So we looped in a number of different check welfare calls. It could be assisting fire, it could be helping someone who's injured. So I probably should have changed that to assisting fire to check welfare calls. My apologies.
Okay, all right. So all right, yeah, the way it was highlighted, that didn't seem possible to me, but I understand what you're saying now. The civil matter standby, it just seems like those, particularly when you're talking about kids being transferred from parent to parent, it just seems like that could go wrong, and you don't know which one of those calls is going to go badly wrong. I don't know, having civilians do that, I'm not sure how an angry father who was expecting to have his kid or something, and same thing with a shopkeeper dealing with a customer. You know, we're getting those smash and grabs now in California. You just don't know when it could go wrong. I don't know that a civilian would get treated with the same deference by an unruly customer or an angry parent as someone in a uniform would. The abandoned vehicle, I understand what you're saying. The only concern there would be we had an abandoned vehicle by the airport a few years ago, and it shut down the airport. The person just left the car by the curb. I can't remember if you were chief or how long ago that was, but you may remember the incident. That's an extreme one. They literally they thought it was going to be a bomb or something. That probably wouldn't be the case if you just had it somewhere else, I guess. But found property, I understand that. The illegal parking is a big issue, at least in my district, around schools. Is it possible, if there's a school resource officer, to deal with it? Or, I mean, why can't we have a parking patrol? I mean, you know where the spots are. It's not that hard. I get similar complaint. Horizon High School is one, for example, where people park in the neighborhoods where there are big no parking signs. I mean, it just seems like that's something the person could have a patrol every day until people get sick of getting tickets and don't park there anymore. Noise complaints, I will point out, a lot of these complaints we're getting, and that's way up, is because of B&Bs. So you and I have talked about that, Chief. Certainly the folks in Desert Horizon and Black Mountain and I have talked about this at length. You know, I don't know how we cut down on that exactly, because I'm sure those calls are probably going way up, at least if my reading of it is any indication. I just want to make those points. Don't necessarily expect you to respond to all of it, but just things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. And Chief, real quick before you go to the next slide, number 3, how many calls is for the drug overdose?
What was the question again? I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
How many calls on number 3 for the drug overdose?
I don't have that number. Mike may have that number. I don't have it on my notes.
Okay, no problem. I'll get it from
you later. But we can circle back.
Yes,
again, Madam Chair, to Councilman Waring's point, This is just preliminary information that we're going through. We didn't want you all or the members of the public to be surprised by, or our employees, to be honest, to be surprised by the types of calls that we're looking at. We've made no decisions on these whatsoever. We're really just trying to introduce the topic and the idea. To Councilman Waring's point, we're very much aware of the illegal parking issue. I love the idea of having a parking patrol and or police assistance, or if the school has a school resource officer, kind of augmenting that. So those are great ideas. There was always some concern about the noise complaints, because we are very much aware, Chief Kurtenbach and I are very much aware, that regardless of how many calls we say we're not going to respond to, that it's a potential that PD would be responding to those calls anyways. So we're, again, working through this issue with Arizona State University. We've had a number of meetings with them. And as I've messaged to my employees, this is just preliminary look at the types of things we could offboard in order to maintain service delivery. And I do believe Chief Kurtenbach has the number, Chairwoman O'Brien, of the check welfare calls.
Thank you, Chief Williams. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the total number for the last year is 552 drug overdose calls that we responded to. I believe Chief Williams made the point. The key point is that we deployed naloxone 81 times and saved 81 lives during that time. The number is relatively small, however.
Okay, thank you so much for that information, and thank you for the additional clarification, Chief, on this being preliminary information. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second item that we'd like to discuss and talk about is the deferred patrol response option that we kicked off on December 6th. So what that is we realize and are aware that we can have officers come into the station and work overtime and respond to those priority 3 calls for service and take those online to keep the patrol officers available to respond to priority calls for service. So we're talking about criminal damage calls with no follow-up, reports only, or calls where there's no follow-up by an officer or detective. These officers can sit in the precincts and take those calls for service. We're also aware, and we ran a program, I believe it was a couple years ago, where we had a wagon transport prisoners from North Zone into the booking center, and we run those wagons with 2-person units, and so that's going to be in an overtime program also. And again, making sure that we're not coming up with these ideas on our own as a police department. We're working with Arizona State University and the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, to make sure that what we're putting in place or thinking about has evidence-based and is being looked at from an academic perspective. The third adjustment we'd like to talk about is the dispatch protocol changes. Our communications dispatch protocols had not been updated until recently. So what we're doing is the call taker is now showing where the officers are and assigning the closest unit to go to the priority calls for service. A lot of this effort will reduce the strain on our dispatchers also. So there are 2 different areas that we're looking at. You want to minimize the strain on the call takers as well as minimize the strain on dispatching officers to calls. So we are going to start that pilot program, Councilman Waring, up in Black Mountain Precinct, to see what kind of impact or positive impact we could have on that.
Can I ask a question that maybe isn't totally on you guys, but I've had complaints that people have called 911 and been put effectively on hold, or there's been a delay. I believe we, as a council, boosted the pay of those folks and then also hired more to take the calls. So you talk about your point 4 is effort to reduce strain on dispatchers. Is there any anecdotal or numerical evidence that that's working and that's helping get your folks deployed faster to where they're supposed to go?
So, Madam Chairwoman, Councilman Waring, we've increased our employee assistant unit program to expand that to our civilian staff workers as well as dispatch the therapy dog into the call center. I don't have any anecdotal information, but I do know we're still hiring, we're still graduating communications classes, and we believe that this dispatch protocol change is really going to be effective and efficient to help our employees. We can come back later in a couple of months after we've studied it a little bit further to provide that information to you at a later date.
Thank you, Chief.
We've talked a lot about civilianization, and we could run the spectrum when we talk about what policing looks like in the future. You all approved, Mayor and Council approved the whole civilianization of our central booking program. We were very aware that 18 officers and 4 sergeants in a booking area wasn't the best and most effective use of our sworn staffing levels. So we're moving forward with that, and the transition's in progress. We're actually also allowed through HR doing a mid-year conversion of the temporary detention officer positions to regular positions. So we're moving that forward. Our community assistance program, or CAP program, we've been working through what a call tree looks like, what that looks like in triage mode. So we're still working through that, as well as working through identifying additional civilian positions that we could utilize either in investigations, in other areas of the police department. So we're excited about the opportunity that you all approved the civilianization of the investigator. So we're hopeful later on that that's going to help us out. Please don't be surprised if one of these days we come back to you asking you for more police assistance, because to Councilman Waring's point, the whole parking issue, those different kind of calls for service that we have, we could use civilians in those positions as opposed to sworn. Mayor and Council also approved additional funding for us to purchase body-worn cameras for all of our sworn staff in the police department. What this is allowing us to do is to have anyone outside of the patrol function to have the opportunity to work overtime in patrol to help and assist. So 200 body-worn cameras have arrived and have been distributed to those wishing to work off-duty or supplemental overtime, and another 500 have been received and will be assigned to employees. And lastly, we talked a lot about, I know Chief Kurtenbach sat at the table and has talked at length about the Specialty to Patrol program, where we're having detectives and other employees in other areas outside of patrol spending 1 or 2 weeks in patrol, helping and assisting, answering calls for service. We're going to need to continue that through 2022 in order to maintain baseline services. To date, I've run into a couple of employees, I know Chief Kurtenbach can say the same, that initially there was a little bit of hesitation to go out and patrol, and now they're really finding some of the benefit for both them as well as the patrol officers. In conclusion, we talked a little bit through the 6 different department efforts that we're looking at in order to maintain baseline services. It is always our responsibility and our idea to make sure that we're providing some relief to the patrol officers out there as well as those call takers, because we do want to minimize burnout. And I think this is the second to the last slide that I have before I close. In addition to the 9% raise granted by Mayor and Council in July, Mayor and Council also approved the retention incentive that gives the city manager the authority to provide up to $7,500 to officers over a 2-year period. So we're thankful for that. As previously mentioned, to Councilman Waring's point, the Employee Assistance Unit has been a game changer for us, and we've doubled the amount of people that we have in the Employee Assistance Unit. So thank you to Chief Kurtenbach for really pushing that effort. Truth be told, we have one of the best EAUs, or Employee Assistance Units, in the country, and many people come and ask us questions about that. And lastly, in order to make sure we try to maintain a level of morale with our employees, our new Blue Line Review series always starts off and ends with thanking our employees for their service and what they do. Typically, my PDTV videos that I run also has some type of appreciation to our employees. And when we see them walking around downtown or at a precinct or at a briefing, we're very sure to start off by saying and thanking them for their service. So with that, we are welcoming any questions that you all may have. And thank you for the opportunity to share some of the things that we're working on to try to mitigate what's going on with our staffing levels. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes, Councilman.
So going back to the chief's initial list, and we had talked, or at least we talked with Chief Kurtenbach at this committee a couple times, really, the last couple meetings, about retirees coming back into the department. Certainly some of the, I was thinking more like senior people helping out detecting on cases and so forth, but you could also use them for some of these functions. I guess it would be maybe it's the second list where you highlighted in the colors, the drug overdoses and the assisting fire. But, some of those from memory, the abandoned vehicles and the loose animals and maybe, depending, civil matter standby, found property, those would be, I don't know how else to say it, so I'll just say it like this, more low impact for people who maybe don't want to chase, bank robbers or something anymore. How are we doing on that program? The idea of using our retirees, welcoming them back, paying them.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee, Councilmember Waring, we're still in the initial phases of getting that onboarded. Our idea initially was going to be to have those retirees or those persons with experience to help us out in the investigation section. So with our Specialty Patrol program, we're having detectives go out. Perhaps those additional resources can help with speaking to people, following up on cases, packaging cases, those kind of things.
Yes, and I agree. I initially thought of it, I don't remember, we discussed it in such detail, but yes, the idea would be that they could make phone calls and follow up with witnesses and travel if necessary and what have you. You're right, freeing up the detectives. But as I'm looking at this list, you might also be able to use people who would then still be sworn officers, would still get the respect of the angry father or mother or whatever. They might still be in the uniform, so they're not a civilian, but it's not the same as like the full-time going out on patrol, all night, that kind of thing either. And a lot of these activities we're talking about would be more daytime activities. You did say about the noise complaint, there was something about business hours. Obviously the noise complaints, that usually is at night when you get, calls about that. So I don't know if that would work unless the retiree is like my father-in-law was just used to staying up all night, just kind of kept that schedule. So just something to think about, because I was thinking about that when you looked at this list. Because, my initial thing was also they could help with investigations, but this might also be a place people might be interested in getting back out and mixing and mingling a little bit. This would allow them to do that as well if that was something they were interested in.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee, Councilmember Waring, we're open to any and all options. Also keep in mind we have a very robust reserve program. So a number of our reserve officers we could use also to answer some of these call types. And again, I just wanted to make sure we clarified again that this is just an initial list. So this is a starting point to advise you all, to advise members of our public, to advise our employees what we're looking at. Thank you.
Chief, and I Madam Chair, I do understand that it's not something you put into practice or anything else, but just figured, I could just envision some of the complaints we might have, so I figured I might as well voice those potential objections now or potential comments now before it actually got any further down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. I have other members that have questions?
I do, Chairwoman, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chief, for the presentation. I think this is looking very promising. I'm glad the study garnered such positive results. Just a couple clarification questions. Is the advice of the study in terms of this list, do they advise that then the individuals that would be responding, would those individuals be armed?
Madam Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Ansari, so what they are talking about doing in the Arizona State University study is not have a police officer or a sworn member respond to these types of calls for service, but augment that with perhaps civilian people, and our civilians obviously wouldn't be armed, but our reserve bureaus would. So they're not discussing armed people or not armed people. It was just the advice of Arizona State University and a number of different research studies looking at other cities and other practices that are happening across the nation on what police departments are going to stop doing in order to make sure we have the staffing in place for priority calls.
Got it. No, yeah, I understood the sworn versus not sworn. I just didn't know if like a civilian position may still be, like if that individual still might carry a gun or not. We just don't know. Okay. And then did they provide any advice or recommendations on timeline? Like I know we're still at the early stages, but if you were to come forward and say, okay, we're going to take 4 through 9 and transition, do they do they provide advice on how long that would take or what sort of training would be necessary?
So, Council, Chairwoman O'Brien and members of the subcommittee, again, we're in further discussions with the Arizona State University. I'll be honest, I just wanted a quick list to provide and share information with you all. So we're still in discussion with them. We can come back at a later date and then have Dr. Michael Scott, who's our research person with ASU, come in and answer and respond to questions more in depth. He is definitely a better subject matter expert in that than I.
Okay, sounds good. That would be great. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'm sorry. Vice Mayor, do you have any questions?
No specific questions. I think one of the cities we looked at was Berkeley, California, that has found some alternatives. So I think for that next conversation, just trying to figure out what other cities are doing and what they've done to use other folks.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just ask another one or at least make a point if the others are done?
Yes.
Thank you. So just looking at the list, I mean, really, if you're having a drug overdose, you would much rather have a doctor or a medical professional standing with you than a police officer. We just don't have medical professionals driving around the city in city cars responding to calls. But there's not necessarily any magic, and you wouldn't necessarily, to Councilwoman Ansari's point, you know, there's not really, unless they're being violent or something, there's no real magic to having a gun or being a police officer to address that particular issue. I understand Chief Kurtenbach's point about, you know, they have the drug and can administer it, but again, that's a relatively recent phenomenon that hasn't been really part of policing, you know, all the way through. So, you know, that's certainly something that could be addressed. It's just how, really, it's more of a delivery issue. How would you have those people ready to go to the site of the drug overdose? You know, people have called police. How would that work? So that's really the issue there. Not so much that we have to have a police officer responding to them. The loose animal, you'd rather have a vet or an animal trainer responding to that than a police officer. Just because you're been to the police academy, it doesn't necessarily mean you're some expert on animals or know how to trap a loose animal or something. So same thing. So the question would be how to get the person who knows about animals to the loose animal site. I've done my share of door knocking, and I've been chased by dogs and so forth that are roaming around. It does happen. And when it does happen, it can be terrifying. It's never really, I've been bitten once, but it's never really reached the level where it was like life-threatening. But I've seen big animals on the loose that mercifully left me alone. It's surprising how often you see that. And it's usually, you know, larger dogs that have either snuck out or the owner's just been inattentive and the animal bolts. But again, you'd probably want somebody more practiced in animals if that was possible. It's just how to do that. But regardless, you don't necessarily need a gun and a badge to deal with the loose animals. So there are certainly opportunities here, to your point, to have, and Councilman Ansari's point, to have non-sworn people respond to some of these. The found property and the abandoned vehicles, I would say that falls into those categories too. I would be more inclined not to do this, and I know you're not doing it now, but the civil matter standby, I just think we got to think about what we're going to say if you send out somebody who's not armed to a situation like that, because these situations happen with alarming frequency, and a person goes crazy and kills their whole family, and then the non-sworn, non-gun carrying person that we sent out there saying basically, in effect, everything will probably be fine. This is a low impact call. I don't know that I want to answer those questions and deal with the resulting tragedy, because it just seems like there's just a continuous series nationwide of terrible family situations. And also sometimes, you know, the shopkeeper example used as well. So I just want to make that point. There's definitely, to my mind, different levels of where this makes sense with this list of 11. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. And I'd like to thank you, Chief, for giving us a I guess, upfront view of what's more to come. And look forward to getting some additional details in the future including if we can learn more at a future meeting about maybe the impact of when we are putting our specialty to patrol, how is that impacting our case closure rate or our investigations at a future meeting would be wonderful.
Sounds good, Chairman.
Thank you so much. And then with that, we have one more public speaker.
Chairwoman?
Yes.
I made a mistake in motioning for the legislative agenda item. I did have a question for staff on one of the recommendations. Are we able to bring them back?
Are they still there?
Madam Chair, our staff on that item are not in the room any longer.
Could you ask the question of Lori maybe and they can get back to us?
I would be happy.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure with our homelessness plan, we made a commitment to not criminalize folks. And so I'll talk to staff, but just want to make sure on the street feeding that we're not encouraging further criminalization. But I'll talk to staff and see if we could get that resolved or what the intention is behind it.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, I'm fairly confident that that is already something that they are including in the agenda, that it would not be a criminalization effort, but I will confirm that with staff as well.
Thank you so much, Lori. Appreciate that. Councilwoman Ansari?
Yeah, I think, and to Lori, be more specific, it's a piece around street feeding that we wanted to get more clarification on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have one more speaker to address the subcommittee. Ann Ender?
Yes. I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chairwoman O'Brien, subcommittee members, and even though they left the room, Chief Williams and Chief Kurtenbach. I'm Ann Ender, President of Operation Blue Ribbon. And as a citizen, my priority is public safety for all citizens in this city. And I have read through the reports, both on the research reports as well as the report that the chief just presented. And in that report, the conclusion states that based on the survey cities, which I also have questions about, Phoenix authorized sworn staffing levels are in line with other agencies. That can't possibly be correct, because otherwise we wouldn't be in the conflict that we have today and actually trying to recruit more officers and having the issues that we have today. And I say that with a little bit of experience that I do work with the stats regularly for the task force that I participate in. So opinion critical in the current numbers of sworn staff is the relationship to the increasing calls for service and response, but even most important, the increase in crime, especially violent crime. So you'll probably get weary of hearing me say this all the time, but our whole mantra is that the community and public and PD are what help create public safety. So in relationship, I had a couple questions about the department's efforts that the chief did also refer to. I was curious about the timeline for the community assistance program to expand and be deployed. And then regarding recruitment efforts, I was wondering if it's possible to expand those efforts to community partners, such as like ours, which we are doing a little bit of, block watches, neighborhood associations, getting them engaged to help getting the message out, or possibly in events having a table there or having recruitment people there. And last, as far as morale, I think you all know that's why we formed, and we're actively working to engage other community partners. But if the department has any suggestions on how we might do that better or could get even more traction, we'd be open to that as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
thank you so much for your comments, and we'll have an update on the community action program, I'm sure, coming soon. The future agenda items have been sent out. Are there any additional requests? Okay, hearing none, then our meeting would be adjourned 10:27. Thank you.
Mayor Gallego and members of the Phoenix City Council celebrated the relocation of this iconic mural by artist Paul Cole at the Phoenix Rental Car Center. Titled The Phoenix, it's comprised of 3 16-foot tall panels and is 75 feet wide. The mural used to hang in Sky Harbor's Terminal 2, which opened in 1962. After Terminal 2 was decommissioned, the mural was carefully removed and stored at the airport. The historic artwork was reinstalled in the Phoenix Rental Car Center for future generations of travelers to enjoy.